She can betray everything, not because she's evil, but because of something she feels and cannot control. Have you ever noticed how certain people seem to attract chaos, pull you into an intensity that feels real, and then simply disappear without explanation? And when they come back, it's as if nothing happened. This pattern destroys more lives than any direct betrayal, because you lose time, stability, and your own identity trying to understand what went wrong. This isn't about attacking women or men. It's about understanding an unconscious psychological dynamic that can drain your energy, your focus, and your purpose if you don't know how to recognize it. I'm going to explain a hidden pattern that makes certain relationships destructive, how to identify the signs from the beginning, how to react without losing your dignity, and mainly, how to protect your life and your goals from this emotional trap. This isn't empty theory, it's strategy based on deep psychology, practical observation, and real experiences that many live through but few understand. Before we continue, I need you to do something for me. If this video is making sense so far, click the like button and turn on notifications. This helps me reach more people who need to hear this, and you guarantee you won't miss the next content about relationships, purpose, and life strategy. Now let's get to what matters. I'm going to use a simple but powerful psychological lens to frame this problem. Freud talked about three forces inside the human mind: the id, which is pure primitive desire, the superego, which represents rules and internal morality, and the ego, which tries to balance the two. When these forces enter severe conflict, especially because of old traumas, the person develops contradictory behavior patterns. She can approach you intensely because the id wants connection and validation, but at the same time, the superego screams that intimacy is dangerous, that trusting is weakness. The ego, trying to mediate, creates strange behaviors, flirts strongly, then withdraws without warning, tests your reaction, comes back when she perceives you're pulling away. This back and forth isn't planned evil, it's unconscious defense. The problem is, you don't lose her because she's bad. You lose yourself because you let these unconscious patterns dictate your choices, your reactions, and your emotional state. Let's go deep into the psychological root of this. Imagine someone who grew up in an environment where affection was unpredictable. Sometimes there was attention, other times she was ignored or emotionally abandoned. The child's brain registers this as intimacy is dangerous because it can disappear at any moment. When this child becomes an adult, she carries this unconscious record. So what happens?
She approaches you, feels the intensity, starts creating a bond. But then the internal alarm goes off. Her superego screams, "Danger! You're vulnerable! This will end badly." The id still wants the connection, but the superego forces a withdrawal. The result? She disappears, gets cold, creates distance. You're confused, thinking you did something wrong. Actually, you activated her wound just by being present and available. And here the trap begins. She comes back when you pull away, because then she feels safe again. You're not too close, so her fear diminishes and desire returns. This cycle becomes addictive. Initial validation, quick idealization, unconscious test through silence or withdrawal, partial repair when you react, and the cycle restarts. This isn't always conscious. Often she herself doesn't understand why she acts this way. But conscious or not, the result is the same. You lose your center, your focus, your peace. Now let's go to practical signs, the behaviors you can observe before sinking too deep into this dynamic. First, sudden oscillations without apparent reason. One day she's sending affectionate messages, making plans, being caring. The next day, dry responses, takes forever to respond, or simply ignores. You didn't change, nothing happened, but her behavior flipped completely. Second sign, constant tests. She provokes small situations to measure your reaction.
Stays silent for days and observes if you'll beg for attention. Makes passive-aggressive comments to see if you'll fight or defend yourself. Mentions other people to test jealousy. All of this are unconscious tests to confirm if you're emotionally trapped. Third sign, lack of congruence between words and actions. She talks about the future, about plans together, about how important you are, but her actions undermine any stability. Cancels meetings at the last hour, doesn't include you in important parts of her life, disappears precisely in moments that should be of presence. Fourth sign, public activity with private indifference. She posts stories, interacts with others on social media, but ignores your messages. She's online, but doesn't respond. This isn't by chance, it's unconscious control. She keeps you in uncertainty while seeking external validation. Now, pay attention to the internal signs, what she activates inside you. If you notice you've gone back to seeking approval like a child waiting for parental attention, that's a huge red flag. If you feel the need to fix or save, as if it were your responsibility to heal her wound, be careful. If you're losing your routine, leaving workouts aside, neglecting projects and friends because all your mental attention is focused on her and her behavior, you've already entered the trap.
These internal signs are more important than external ones because they show you've surrendered your power. And when you surrender power in a relationship like this, you're not building intimacy, you're feeding a destructive dynamic. Let's interpret this with the Freudian lens in a simple way. First concept, repression and reaction formation. This means that when a person has feelings she considers unacceptable, like fear of abandonment or intense need for affection, she represses these feelings and acts in the opposite way. So instead of showing she needs you, she acts with indifference. Instead of admitting she's afraid of losing, she creates distance. This contrary behavior generates mystery, unpredictability, and that triggers your insecurity. You start chasing precisely because she pulled away. Second concept, projection and transference. She projects her own insecurities onto you. If she's afraid of not being enough, she'll accuse you of being distant or not valuing her. If she feels guilt about something, she'll find flaws in you to justify the distance. And you, wanting to resolve it, accept these projections as if they were true. You start questioning yourself, changing behavior, trying to prove you're not what she's saying. This is transference. You assume her emotional burden and react as if the fault were yours. Practical example. She accuses you of not giving enough attention, but you know you're present.
Her projection is about her own internal sense of emptiness, not about your real action. But if you fall into the trap of defending yourself obsessively, you validate the projection and lose even more power. Now the part that really matters, response strategy. What to do in practice when you recognize this pattern. Central principle, memorize this. Don't react, recognize. There are 3 simple but powerful steps. First, name the dynamic internally. When you feel that sensation of confusion, of being pulled emotionally without clear reason, stop and say mentally, "This is a pattern. It's not about me." Second, maintain concrete boundaries. Don't adjust your entire life to her erratic behavior. Keep your workout schedules, your commitments, your routines. If she disappears, you don't stop living waiting for her to come back. Third, transform energy into action. All that anxiety, that urge to send a message, to demand explanation, to try to understand, redirect it to workout, to projects, to meeting friends. Emotional energy wasted on reaction becomes weakness. Energy channeled into action becomes power. Let's go to specific tactics and ready-made phrases you can use. How to respond to her silence. Simple. No drama, no demands. If she disappeared for days and comes back out of nowhere, you don't need to pretend everything's fine or explode in demands. Respond with dignity and functional indifference. Something like, "No problem, I'll catch you later." Or, "All good, talk to you when you're free." This communicates that you have your own life and aren't desperate for her attention.
How to respond to accusations or projections. Don't defend yourself. Defense validates the accusation. Instead, use questions that return responsibility. If she says, "You don't care," ask, "What do you need me to do differently?" This forces her to leave emotional vagueness and enter the concrete. If she can't answer with clarity, you already know it's projection. Another powerful tactic, the strategic mirror. Calmly show the consequences of her behavior without emotion. Example, "I respect my time. If you keep canceling, I won't rearrange my schedule." This isn't a threat, it's a boundary. You're communicating that your life has value and you won't sacrifice it for inconsistent behavior. Now, what not to do? Because here, many destroy any chance of getting out of this with dignity. Don't try to correct or explain obsessively. She won't understand through logic something that's emotional and unconscious. You'll just wear yourself out and seem needy. Don't try to fix her wound. You're not her therapist, and even if you were, she needs to want to heal herself. You trying to save only reinforces the unhealthy dependency dynamic. Don't offer excessive emotional proofs, long messages explaining how much you care, trying to convince of your value. This only shows desperation.
She doesn't doubt your value for lack of evidence. She doubts because her wound distorts perception. When to escalate to the nuclear option, meaning cut off completely? There are clear criteria. If the pattern repeats for months without real change, if there's public manipulation, like involving third parties, posting indirect messages, creating false narratives combined with silence or private coldness, if she uses other people to control you, like making friends or exes appear in the story to provoke you, then there's no negotiation. It's time to cut. How to do this with dignity? First, digital cleanup. Remove from social media or block if necessary. It's not anger, it's protection. Second, avoid mutual contacts for a while. Don't go to places where you'll run into her. Don't ask about her to mutual friends. Third, if you're going to communicate the decision, be brief and definitive. No long explanations. Something like, "I've decided to go separate ways. I wish you the best." And stop. Don't respond to re-engagement attempts. Don't fall into closure conversation that's actually manipulation to pull you back. We're reaching the middle, and I need your help again. If you're understanding these patterns and recognizing situations from your own life, leave a comment now saying which sign you identified that surprised you most. This helps the algorithm show this video to more people and creates a community of people who want to truly grow. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe now because the next videos will deepen these strategies about relationships and purpose even more. Now let's talk about the return test, because this is the part where most people lose all the progress they conquered. After you pull away, maintain boundaries, rebuild your life, it's very common for her to come back. And when she comes back, it's usually with intensity, affectionate messages, apologies, promises of change, remembering the good times. Here happens the return test. Most men react emotionally. They're happy she came back, forget everything that happened, cancel commitments to see her, go back to putting her at the center of life, and then the entire cycle restarts. Why does this happen? Because deep down, you never completely processed the pattern. You only reacted to the pain, pulled away for survival, but didn't transform internally. So when she comes back, the old wound wakes up and you fall again. How to avoid this? Simple rules. Maintain your routine no matter what happens. If you have training scheduled, meeting, hang out with friends, you don't cancel because she wants to see you. She needs to fit into your life, not the other way around. Respond with clarity and choices, not with emotion. If she asks if you can meet, you don't respond with excitement like, "Oh yes, whenever you want." You respond, "I'm free Friday after 8. Does that work?" This shows you have structure, and she needs to respect it. If she can't fit in, that's her problem. How to verify if the return is real or just another cycle? Practical questions that expose consistency.
Does she respect your schedules and commitments or try to make you change everything for her? Does she support your goals or subtly sabotage your focus? Does she act with coherence between what she says and what she does? Or does that incongruence of beautiful words and actions that create instability continue? You can even create a test with dignity. Schedule something that requires commitment from her, like an event 2 weeks from now, something she needs to plan and show up to. If she cancels, postpones, or creates drama at the last minute, you have your answer. It's not about a trick. It's about observing real behavior under commitment condition. The bigger goal here isn't just to understand her. It's to transform you internally. Use this pain as fuel. Every difficult relationship, every disappointment can be converted into growth if you consciously decide. Take that energy you spent trying to decipher her behavior and put it into heavy training. Take that anxiety and transform it into a new project, into learning something, into expanding your social circle.
The concept is to become sovereign, not in an arrogant sense, but in the sense of having emotional autonomy. You don't need her to feel complete. You don't depend on her validation to know your value. When you reach this point, something interesting happens. Either she perceives the change and truly aligns because now you're not available for childish dynamics, or she gives up and goes looking for another person who accepts the pattern. Both results are victory for you. In the first, you have a healthy relationship with someone who grew. In the second, you freed yourself from weight that prevented you from moving forward. Now, let's go to the final checklist to decide if it's worth staying or if it's time to go definitively. Permanence criteria. Consistent respect, not just when it's convenient for her. Congruence between words and actions for prolonged period, like months, not just weeks. Real investment in the relationship. She puts energy, time, attention, doesn't expect only you to carry everything. Emotional responsibility. She recognizes her own patterns and actively seeks to change, doesn't throw blame at you all the time. If the majority of these criteria is no, you already know the answer. Cut. No drama, no anger, but cut. If the majority is yes, but there are still specific problems, then it's worth negotiating boundaries and asking for concrete actions. But negotiate once, with clarity, and observe. If nothing changes, you tried, now it's time to move on.
Let's talk about something few people mention but is crucial: the invisible cost of remaining in a relationship like this. It's not just the lost time, it's not just the wasted emotional energy, it's what you stop building while you're stuck in this cycle. How many projects did you postpone because you were mentally exhausted dealing with unpredictable behavior? How many opportunities did you miss because you weren't in your best state? How many real connections with balanced people did you ignore because you were obsessed with resolving this? The invisible cost is the life you didn't live while trying to make something work that was dysfunctional from the beginning. And the worst, this cost accumulates silently. You don't notice day to day, but when you look back after months or years, you clearly see how much you regressed in important areas while investing in an area that only drained. Another important aspect, often you attract or accept this type of dynamic because there's something in you that needs to be healed too. If you repeatedly find yourself in relationships like this, it's not bad luck, it's not coincidence. There's something in your internal programming that resonates with this pattern. Maybe you also have abandonment wounds. Maybe you associate love with effort and suffering. Maybe you need to prove value because deep down you don't believe you're enough. Recognizing this isn't weakness, it's maturity.
And it's the only way to truly break the cycle. You can cut the relationship with her, but if you don't resolve your part, you'll attract another version of the same dynamic. Real change happens when you decide you'll no longer accept emotional crumbs, not out of anger at her, but out of respect for yourself. There's a huge difference between forgiving and accepting. You can forgive her behavior, understand it comes from old wounds, have compassion for the unconscious pain she carries, but that doesn't mean you need to accept continuing in the relationship. Forgiveness is for your peace. It's not an invitation to continue being disrespected. Some people confuse these things. They think if they forgave, they need to give infinite more chances. No. Forgiveness frees you from resentment, but boundaries protect you from repetition. You can forgive completely and still decide you don't want that person in your life anymore. Both things coexist perfectly. About revenge, it's not worth it. Many men, when they finally wake up to the dynamic, want to retaliate. They want to make her feel the same, want to prove that now they have power. This is a waste of time and dignity. Revenge keeps you emotionally trapped. You're still reacting to her, still giving energy. True indifference doesn't need to prove anything.
You simply move on with your life, build real things, surround yourself with healthy people, and she becomes a distant memory. This bothers her much more than any active revenge because it shows you truly moved on. And truly moving on, without resentment, without need to prove a point, is the greatest sign of emotional maturity. One thing that helps a lot in this process, developing clarity about what you really want in a relationship. Not what society says, not what your friends think, but what you genuinely value. For some, it's partnership and goals. For others, it's peace and emotional stability. For others still, it's passion and adventure. There's no right or wrong, there's what works for you. The problem is, many men never stopped to define this. They accept anything that appears and then get confused about why it doesn't work. Define your relational values. Literally write on paper, what behaviors are non-negotiable for me? What type of energy do I want in a partner? How do I want to feel in a healthy relationship? When you have this clarity, it becomes much easier to identify incompatibility early and exit before sinking. About communication, many think communicating more solves it. If I explain better, if I talk more openly, she'll understand. Sometimes yes, but most times with deep unconscious patterns, rational communication has little effect because the behavior doesn't come from her rational part.
You simply move on with your life, build real things, surround yourself with healthy people, and she becomes a distant memory. This bothers much more than any active revenge because it shows you truly moved on. And truly moving on, without resentment, without need to prove a point, is the greatest sign of emotional maturity. One thing that helps a lot in this process, developing clarity about what you really want in a relationship. Not what society says, not what your friends think, but what you genuinely value. For some, it's partnership and goals. For others, it's peace and emotional stability. For others still, it's passion and adventure. There's no right or wrong, there's what works for you. The problem is many men never stopped to define this. They accept anything that appears and then get confused about why it doesn't work. Define your relational values. Literally, write on paper, what behaviors are non-negotiable for me? What type of energy do I want in a partner? How do I want to feel in a healthy relationship? When you have this clarity, it becomes much easier to identify incompatibility early and exit before sinking. About communication, many think communicating more solves it. If I explain better, if I talk more openly, she'll understand. Sometimes yes, but most times, with deep unconscious patterns, rational communication has little effect because the behavior doesn't come from her rational part. You simply move on with your life, build real things, surround yourself with healthy people, and she becomes a distant memory. This bothers her much more than any active revenge because it shows you truly moved on. And truly moving on, without resentment, without need to prove a point, is the greatest sign of emotional maturity.
One thing that helps a lot in this process, developing clarity about what you really want in a relationship. Not what society says, not what your friends think, but what you genuinely value. For some, it's partnership and goals. For others, it's peace and emotional stability. For others still, it's passion and adventure. There's no right or wrong, there's what works for you. The problem is, many men never stop to define this. They accept anything that appears and then get confused about why it doesn't work. Define your relational values. Literally, write on paper, what behaviors are non-negotiable for me? What type of energy do I want in a partner? How do I want to feel in a healthy relationship? When you have this clarity, it becomes much easier to identify incompatibility early and exit before sinking. About communication, many think communicating more solves it. If I explain better, if I talk more openly, she'll understand. Sometimes yes, but most times with deep unconscious patterns, rational communication has little effect, because the behavior doesn't come from her rational part.
If the person recognizes their own patterns, actively seeks therapy, is committed to real growth, and demonstrates consistent change for a long period, maybe yes, but you need all these elements. Just recognizing isn't enough. Just doing therapy but not applying isn't enough. Just promising change without concrete action isn't enough. And even with all this, you need to decide if you want to wait, if you want to invest energy in this knowing there's no guarantee. Often, the wisest answer is, I sincerely wish she heals, but I won't be a guinea pig in the process. You can root for her growth from a distance while protecting your own peace. A harsh reality, some people won't change. Not because they're bad, but because they're not ready, don't want to pay the emotional price of change, or simply don't see a problem in their own behavior. You can do everything right, be patient, communicate boundaries, offer chances, and still nothing changes, and that's okay. You don't control another person. You only control your choices and reactions. Accepting this is liberating. You stop feeling responsible for fixing someone and start focusing on what you can really change, yourself. Let's now go to practical examples of how these dynamics manifest in daily life to make it even clearer. Example 1. You schedule dinner on Friday. She confirms. You organize your week around it. Thursday night, she sends a message, "I can't make it tomorrow, sorry."
Without offering new date, without real explanation, just that. You're frustrated, but accept. This happens 3 times in a row. Clear pattern of testing and lack of respect for your time. Right response? The 4th time she suggests something, you say, "I leave it open in my agenda. Confirm with me in advance if it's really happening." If she cancels again, you simply stop accepting invites from her. Not with anger, just with boundary. Example 2. She posts story with sad phrase or indirect, clearly directed. You send message asking if everything's okay. She responds, "I'm fine, it's nothing," but continues posting indirects. This is passive manipulation to get attention without having to ask directly. Right response? Don't bite the bait. You saw the post, you offered support once, she said she was fine, done. You move on with your life. If she really needs to talk, she'll communicate directly like an adult. Example 3. You have great date, strong connection. She talks about next steps. After that, she disappears for a week. No message, no explanation. When she reappears, acts as if nothing happened. This is classic pattern of proximity followed by distancing. Right response? When she comes back, you don't ignore completely, because that would be gameplay too, but you keep neutral tone. Respond normally, but don't push conversation, don't try to schedule something immediately.
Show you have a life and weren't frozen waiting. We're getting close to the end, and I want you to do something important now. Share this video with someone you know is going through this. Many men suffer in silence, thinking the problem is only with them, that they're weak for not being able to handle it. This video can be the click that's missing for someone to understand the pattern and recover their own life. And if you want to go even deeper into these themes, check out the playlist I'll leave in the card about relationship psychology and masculine development. About expectations, adjust them to reality. If the person showed clear pattern of inconsistency, don't expect tomorrow will be different just because she promised. Believe in change when you see sustained change, not when you hear promise. Expectations misaligned with reality are the main source of suffering. You want to believe she'll change, so you create expectation based on potential, not on current behavior. And then you suffer every time reality doesn't correspond. Change this. Base expectations exclusively on the behavior pattern already demonstrated. If the pattern is instability, expect instability. Then you're not surprised or disappointed. And if she really changes, it'll be positive surprise, not frustrated expectation. About gratitude. It seems strange to talk about gratitude in the context of painful relationship, but there's something valuable here.
Difficult experiences teach. You learn about boundaries, about your own patterns, about what you tolerate and what you no longer tolerate. You develop discernment. So in a bigger perspective, even relationships that didn't work have value if you extract learning. You don't need to be grateful for the pain, but you can be grateful for the growth the pain forced. This perspective shift helps process and move on without bitterness. About timing. Often the right person appears at the wrong timing. Maybe she has potential but isn't ready now. Maybe you're not ready, and that's okay. You don't need to force fit. If there really is something real, you'll meet again when both are in a better place. And if you don't meet again, it's because it wasn't meant to be. Trusting this takes enormous weight off shoulders. You stop trying to control and force and start flowing with what is. About identity. Never lose your identity in a relationship. Your hobbies, your friends, your goals, your routine, all this needs to continue existing. Healthy relationship adds to your life, doesn't replace your life. If you notice you became another person to accommodate someone, stop and reevaluate. Because when the relationship ends, and it eventually ends if it's based on you being someone you're not, you're lost, not knowing who you are. Keep your core always, no matter who enters or exits your life. We've reached the closing. She wasn't your enemy. She was a mirror that reflected your wounds, your needs, your unconscious patterns. And mirrors don't lie, they just show what's there. The problem was never the mirror. The problem was you continuing to bleed for reflections, trying to change the image instead of healing the real wound. Now you know. You know how to identify the patterns, you know how to respond strategically, you know when to stay and when to go, you know the real work is internal. It's not about blaming her or blaming yourself. It's about taking responsibility for your own healing and for your choices from here forward. You don't control anyone's behavior, but you totally control who you choose to spend your energy, your time, your life with. Now I want to know from you. Which pattern surprised you most? Which sign did you miss at the beginning that now makes complete sense? Leave it in the comments down below. This helps other people who are reading to recognize their own patterns and creates real conversation about these themes many avoid. And if this video made a difference for you, if it helped you see something that was confusing, show it by clicking like, subscribing to the channel, and turning on notifications. I post content like this every week about psychology, strategy, relationships, and purpose. See you in the next one.